I don't know how to do I can't do the heart. If you guys would also help run slides, let me know or talk to Coda. Coda can show you. It's very simple. It's just clicking a button. So I hope you guys are capable of that since you have a smartphone. But anyway, we are rounding out James chapter 5, and the topic tonight is suffering. The topic is also like, how do we endure? How do we have patience in the midst of suffering? And so I may not look like it now, but I used to be a big runner. Bless you, Aiden. I used to be a big runner. I used to run 5Ks. I used to run 1 miles, and I also did half marathons and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that. That was like a big passion of mine after I got out of high school, and I was very competitive in it. And how many of you guys like to run? Like actually run? I like to run, but it's kind of painful. But running easy, whether you enjoy it or not. Kind of. Okay, if you're chasing a ball, maybe. Yes, running is difficult, but even if you're playing basketball, soccer, football, literally any sport you can think of where there's running, hockey as well is very exhausting. It's physically exhausting, and it's also mentally exhausting as well. And a lot of times when we're running a race, I can think of a 5K that I did, my first 2 miles, like 11 and a half minutes, and then I just absolutely tanked my last mile on my 5K and ended up with like a 22-minute 5K. We can burn out. Okay, we can lose our energy, we can lose our focus, we can get discouraged as well because we're not making a lot of progress in the race or in sports or in life. We can, in the proverbial race, look at other people ahead of us, behind us. I've said that to you guys before, those of you guys that are in track, like you look behind and see where people are at in football or track or whatever, you're going to lose some momentum there. But we can do that in life as well and get discouraged by where other people are at and stuff like that. And then lastly, we can often not look to the finish line, if we're being honest, in the sports that we play, in the different activities that we do. We lose sight of the end goal, and we focus on the moment. Whether it's good or bad, we focus on the moment rather than the finish line. And so all of those different examples, we can get physically or mentally tired, we can be discouraged, we focus on other people, we don't look to the finish line. All of that applies to life, and it's particularly applicable to the topic of suffering. And so has there ever been a time in your life where you didn't really have a lot of hope? You were discouraged, you were growing impatient, you just didn't feel like the situation you were in, again, you were not looking at the finish line, you were looking at the circumstances around you. Has there ever been a moment in your life like that, or a season in your life like that? Again, when I would do races, there would be some times where I was really discouraged. My ankles would hurt, I'd get side cramps, other stuff like that. I didn't feel like I trained really well, but in the moment, like I didn't do really well, and that can be applicable in life. We can seek the Lord with all our heart, and yet different circumstances can come into our life, different people, and it can bring us down, and we go through what is called suffering. And does anybody know what suffering is? Anyone want to give me an answer? It's not like super complicated. Prolonged discomfort, and we don't like discomfort in our society, in our culture. We're a culture of convenience, and we don't like the idea that, hey, I need to endure through something that is, we'll just call it something that's difficult. You're experiencing something that is uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, it's harsh on you, either physically or emotionally. We don't like to go through those things. And if we're being honest, we can get a little impatient, can we not? Naturally, we're not patient people. Can we agree with that? If you guys have little siblings, you're lying if you like say that you're always patient, because you're probably not patient all the time with your little siblings, all right? So we're not naturally patient in general, but we're especially not patient when it comes to enduring through suffering and difficulties within our life. And so we want results, we want relief, and we want restitution for the wrongs that people have done against us in the circumstances of our life. And that's not always going to happen. Sometimes the results, the restitution, the relief that we're looking for, it may not come until we leave this earth and are in the presence of God. But ultimately we can have our hope in that. So let's read James chapter 5, verses 7 to 11. Does anybody want to read that? Oh, sorry, Cody. Nerds. Woo! It kissed Isaac's hair. Who wants to read? Mark? Go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, no. Anybody else? Unless you can find a Bible. All right. Landon. Isaac. Okay, never mind. Thanks, Isaac. Excellent. Okay, next slide, Coda. So if we could just boil this passage down to one main point and look at the passage, if you will, maybe in your subheading above verse 7, it says patience and suffering. Christians will suffer, but we must grow in patience to endure through our suffering. Okay, we need to grow in our patience to endure the suffering, and that's not natural for us as human beings, okay? And so the key word there that I have underlined right away is that you are going to suffer. You will suffer different difficulties, and we're going to look at that. That's the result of living in a sinful world. If you guys look around you, I'm going through a problem of evil class right now in seminary. There's natural evil. Do you guys know what natural evil is? Natural evil is hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, tsunamis, any kinds of natural disasters, as well as diseases. Anybody knows the CVID word or COVID word? I don't know if that gets censored. All sorts of different, the bubonic plague and the Spanish flu and all sorts of different diseases. That's under the realm of natural evil. And then also there's moral evil, which is what we say and do towards one another, which is not always loving, gracious. It can be tearing other people down. It can be hateful towards people. It can be violent towards people. That's why we have sex trafficking and adultery and murder and all of these other evils in the world. So there's moral and natural evils in the world, and because of it, we live in a world that is full of sin. Even if we are saved in Jesus Christ, we are going to go through suffering, either at the hands of other people or through the world in which we live in. Like living in Colorado, there's wildfires. We can be subject to those types of evils. So let's set the context for suffering, because you can read this and it's like, where this is really random. He was talking about rich people last week, and now he's talking about suffering and being patient in suffering. Context matters. Everybody say context matters. Good job. That's great. All right, context matters. So verses 1 to 6 set the stage for verses 7 to 11. Okay? So what happened last week? We talked about how being rich is not sinful, right? There's nothing wrong with being rich. But there is something wrong with how these rich people became rich. They became rich by exploiting, taking advantage of, abusing other people. And notice a little word in verse 7. Look at what it says. Be patient, therefore, brothers. Okay? James uses the word brothers or brothers and sisters throughout the book of James. And he's speaking specifically to Christians when he talks about brothers. But in verses 1 to 6 of chapter 5, he is talking to, most scholars believe, unbelievers, because he is talking about people who are living in constant sin that would show that they are not truly Christians. So he speaks to unbelievers in verses 1 to 6. They're taking advantage of other people, probably Christians. And then these other people, these believers most likely, they are suffering at the hands of unbelievers. And they are having their time taken advantage of, their physical well-being is taken advantage of as they exploit them to do their labor in order to build their wealth. So the type of suffering in this passage is related to that, being taken advantage of for your time. But there's two categories of suffering that I want to address tonight. And the first one is within this passage, and it's what we just talked about. Rich people are exploiting, taking advantage of other Christians. They're not believers, they're taking advantage of Christians. But then secondly, I want to talk about just circumstances in general, trials in general, that we don't see in this passage, but we see in chapter 1 of James. So number one, let's look at suffering at the hands of others. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, context matters. Sorry. Suffering at the hands of others. That's point number one. That's what we see in this passage. These people are suffering at the hands of specifically rich people because they've been exploited in that particular way for their time and stuff like that. But secondly, not necessarily in this passage, but another form of suffering that Christians can experience. We see this throughout history, specifically in the Roman Empire, is Christian suffering persecution. What is persecution? Death. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that. So number one, being ostracized. That's a really adult word. We're just going to call it being excluded from a particular group. Maybe that's sports. Like any of you guys that are Christians on a sports team and people are like, hey, I know you're a Christian, and they kind of like we don't really want to include you, or like you're in the group, but we're not actually going to acknowledge that you're there. That's a type of social persecution. Number two, joking or mocking of you. How many of you guys have been mocked because they know you're a Christian, or like, haha, you Bible thumper, stuff like that? It's not that funny. you're going to have those types of comments like that. And sometimes, at least a lot of times, my unbelieving friends, they do it lightheartedly. They know where I stand. But there's other times where people are genuinely like mocking you. And they're ultimately not mocking you, they're mocking Christ. Thirdly, there is physical harm that can happen. Not in our country necessarily. We don't really see physical harm, physical persecution, but that certainly can happen in different contexts. I would say even in school or stuff like that. You could maybe get beaten up in like a school in the city or something like that if somebody knows that you're a Christian. And same thing with emotional abuse as well. Just doing things, saying things that are emotionally chipping away at your self-esteem, your character, and bringing you down because you follow Christ, or just because people want to be mean to you, because people can be mean like that. That's a form of social persecution. It's not physically attacking you, but as we talked about weeks ago, words harm and stick with us more than physical harm actually does in a lot of ways. We can't just get rid of the words that people say to us that hurt us. And then finally, yes, physical harm can also be in the form of death. There's a massive persecution in Nigeria right now. I think 100,000 Christians have been slaughtered over the past 20-some years. It's a major issue. China is also one of the most God-hating, anti-Christian countries. There's different countries around the world that are persecuting Christians, and they're dying for their faith. So there's the social persecution and there's the physical persecution, and both of these types of persecution, along with what we see in the context here, they're being taken advantage of. These are all forms of suffering that Christians can and will go through in their life. And it may not be super extreme in the United States of America. We're probably not going to be killed for our faith unless this country gets really, really evil. But we may lose out on a job opportunity, or we may lose out on a college scholarship because people know where we stand on our convictions, stuff like that. So Matthew chapter 10, go to the next slide. I think I put it up there. Sweet. Somebody want to read that? Go ahead, Daniel. Will be saved. I thought you said whoever hits you, and I'm like, that's also accurate because people can. That was a clutch throw, dude. Did you see that? It went like down his jacket pocket. That's awesome. Okay. And all nations will hate you. Not like some nations or some people. Like all people will hate you because we live in the world, and who is the god of this world? Satan is the god of this world. And so he wants to do everything he can to kill, to attack, to harm our witness as Christians. But Jesus says, but everyone who endures to the end. Endure. Endurance or perseverance, we're going to look at that in a little bit. Secondly, next slide. So that's the first form of persecution or suffering, is physical, emotional, being taken advantage of, stuff like that. Number two, suffering from uncontrollable circumstances. And we don't see that in this passage here. I just want to make that clear for those who are watching on camera and stuff like that. We're not taking this passage out of context. But go to James chapter 1, verse 2 if you want to. Consider it pure joy, brothers, whenever you go through trials of various kinds. And so those trials can be a health crisis. Maybe you know somebody in your life who has different health issues or a chronic health issue that does not go away. Somebody's experienced cancer or different types of diseases or illnesses that there is not a cure for, that they walk with every single day, that is chronic and that harms the quality of their life. Number two, a loss of a loved one. Maybe you guys haven't lost a loved one yet, maybe a grandparent or other people, but we all are going to lose people in our life because of sin in this world. Number three, a loss of a job or financial insecurity. Maybe you have a parent who lost their job or they had a transition in their job and other types of stuff like that, to where it's like we don't have money to pay for all the things that we otherwise would have. And so there's a little bit of insecurity there, and you suffer through those types of difficulties because you're not able to have all the things that you normally would have. And then lastly, and this is not exhaustive, but divorced parents is also a very big one. I know plenty of people who have experienced that as well, and going through hardships with navigating that. Okay, so those are two different categories of how we can go through different types of suffering: physical, emotional, relational, and these are all just a glimpse. These are just some examples of the reality in the presence of sin. And so we are going to suffer. That's not what we like to hear. But the question is, how do we suffer well? Okay, have you ever asked that question? Maybe you've never asked that question. How do we suffer well? I don't ask that question a lot because I don't like to suffer either. I want the most convenient life possible until I can leave this world and be free from all of the evil in it. So one of the keys that we see, James mentions it 3 times, verse 7, verse 8, somewhere down there, verse 11 as well. We need to be patient. How do I suffer through the circumstances that I'm going through? Whether it's relational, emotional, those types of things that I'm going through, I need to learn how to be patient in the different chapters and different seasons of life that I'm in. So, definition of patience. Can you go to the next slide? I don't know if I put it up there. Oh, go back. We don't want to see that yet. Okay, patience. Listen up. Patience is the capacity, and listen and ask yourself, am I like this or not? And you should all say no, because none of us are perfect. The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Okay, how often we can get angry, we can get upset, we can get annoyed with the troubles. We often do not tolerate delays, and we often do not accept what's going on in our lives. It's like, no, I want to get out of this as quickly as possible, however I can. So patience is what we need to do. We just said there that that's what we struggle to do, but we need to put on patience. And another couple synonyms for the word patience is endurance, which I've already said, and also the word persevere. Maybe you guys have heard of that. Persevere and endure. And that goes back to Matthew chapter 10, verse 22. So just in my mind this morning, as I'm preparing this, I'm like, you know what? Voldemort and Harry Potter, it's a great scene. Go to the next slide. So, like, you want to talk about endurance? Harry Potter, when he's facing off against Voldemort, and he's fighting for his life, Voldemort's trying to kill him, okay? And, like, he's holding on to his wand. If he lets go, what's going to happen? He's going to get killed. Same thing with Mace Windu. Those are terrible, terrible images. But the green is Harry Potter, of course. The red is Voldemort. Second slide. Do you guys know who Mace? What? Red is Harry Potter. Sorry. Haley's probably shaking her head right now, like. Regardless. You have a battle that's going on. Okay, two different forces coming at each other. Same thing with Mace Windu in Episode 3 of Star Wars. What happens? The Emperor throws his lightning at him, and he's holding it, and then Anakin has to be a loser. And like, I love Mace Windu, but like, he's holding on to the lightsaber, holding on to the wand, and what are they doing? They need to endure if they are going to survive. Okay, so that was just the imagery that I kind of had in my mind. So I hope that maybe gives you a little bit more of a visual of what's going on. So endurance, patience, perseverance, whatever you want to call it, those types of words are what we need to be characterized by as we go through suffering in our life. And James gives us three different examples that help us, three different visuals. They're not memes, they're not gifts, they're just regular examples for the day and age in which he lived in. So number one, the farmer that waits for their crops needs to be patient, okay? Maybe you guys know farmers in your life, or you see the crops getting planted in March, April, May, whenever it is. The farmer has to wait throughout the growing season until the end. And there's a lot of trust and a lot of patience in that of, am I going to have a good crop? But they need to wait. Secondly, the prophets endured great suffering. What's up, Tate? The prophets endured great suffering. Next slide. The prophets needed to be patient when they were going through suffering. Who are the prophets? They were, what? Paul was an apostle, but yes, representatives of God, basically. Prophets were representatives of God. They spoke. Did you say it? Malachi, that's a prophet for sure. But they spoke for God, and what happened to the prophets? What happened to the apostles? All the apostles died except for John. Yeah. Some of the prophets were physically harmed. They were mocked. They were socially ostracized, as Benji said. Ostracized, big word there, but they were put out. And so they needed to have patience. They needed to endure through the suffering. Lastly, you guys know who Job is. What happened to Job? If there was anybody who was allowed to not be patient, do you think it would be Job? He lost his house, he lost his family, he lost his livestock, which was his currency. He lost his house, he lost literally everything, and his physical body was attacked with all sorts of different sores. That's just Zach. So he needed to be patient. He needed to endure through the suffering that he went through. All three of those examples James lists, verse 7, verse 10, verse 11, are examples of being patient, and that's not natural to us when we go through different suffering. Matthew chapter 6, verse 27. And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? What does that have to do with being patient? Well, the same principle is true. What can we do by worrying about tomorrow and the things that we have tomorrow? What can we gain by it? We can't add any more time to our life. We can't change our future in many ways. And the same thing is true when it comes to going through suffering and stuff like that. We can't be impatient. It's not going to do anything by being impatient. It's like speeding and then getting up ahead and getting to a red light, and that other person rolls up next to you and they look at you like, it's kind of like that. We can be impatient, but it doesn't add any time to our life. And so we need to develop this posture of, I'm content with where I'm at, and I'm going to continue to seek the face of God despite the circumstances because He is my strength. And we do that by learning patience. And how do we learn patience? Okay, how do we suffer well? We learn patience. How do we learn patience? As Pastor Sean says, what? By suffering? We definitely can, but ultimately, very simply, this is simple, elementary. We got to keep our eyes on God, okay? Verses 8 and 9. What does verses 8 and 9 say? Establish your hearts, or strengthen your hearts. I like that one better. Strengthen your hearts because, what is verse, whatever it is, verse 9. Because Jesus stands at the door. What does that mean? He's coming back, okay? So James says, strengthen your hearts. A couple of words to explain that. To make stable, place firmly, set fast. Think about a house that is built on a strong foundation. When I work construction, we always set a sound foundation. You have a level structure to build the rest of your structure off of. We need to have a firm foundation if we are going to suffer well and have patience in that suffering, and that comes by fixing our eyes on God, and part of that is rooting ourselves on the foundation of God's Word. Suffering and hardships are going to make us. Next slide. Maybe the next slide. I don't know. Okay, yeah. Well, you're going to fail, okay? You're going to be impatient when we go through suffering and hardships, all right? We know this already. We're not going to be perfect, but the goal is to be growing in that. We're going to get discouraged. We're going to question the goodness of God even in the suffering that we do go through. If somebody socially persecutes us or ostracizes us, or if we are physically harmed or belittled because of our walk with God, we're going to complain as well. We're all going to do these different types of things. And the reality of suffering in our life or the lives of other people is a big reason why many teenagers especially walk away from the faith, because they don't really ever get an answer for why we go through those types of things. And it's simply, we established at the beginning, because we live in a sinful world and God has allowed the world to be corrupted by sin, and He's ultimately going to redeem the world at some point. And that is going to be when Jesus comes back and makes all things new. We don't know when that's going to be, but we do know that He is going to come back, and that is what our hope is in. I'm going through something that's really difficult right now, whether it's a physical condition, a health condition or whatever, or the social discrimination by somebody or mistreatment, but ultimately, or a loss of a loved one, other stuff like that. But that isn't the end of where it stops. It's not like in atheism where it's like we have all sorts of bad things happen and then you die and that's it. Like there is hope beyond this world that all things are going to be made new. Justice is going to be fully dished out by God. The evil are going to pay for their sins, and we are going to be fully delivered and ultimately fully healed from all of the physical and the spiritual contaminations that we have. Jesus has healed us spiritually in delivering us from the power of sin, but the presence of sin is still around us and even within us, and we get delivered from that at the end. And until that comes, we're going to suffer. We're going to be impatient in that suffering. And we can either wallow in that and be like, oh, like I can't, I'm struggling, or we can fix our eyes on God through His Word. And you guys are going to discuss more about how to actually apply this passage, this topic. We can do that, set our foundation on God's Word, or we can try and do things on our own. And you're not going to find peace, you're not going to find comfort, you're not going to find hope in anything or anyone else besides Jesus. In that moment when Jesus comes back, as James says, He's going to come back. Jesus is standing at the door. We don't know when that's going to be. It could be tomorrow. We should be ready, and we should live as if we are ready. But when He does come back, we're not going to remember the suffering, the evil, all the different circumstances that we're going through in this world, because we're going to be captivated by Jesus. And I love the song, the clouds will be rolled back as a scroll. There's going to be a trumpet sound. Jesus is going to descend from the clouds. It's going to be a very awe-inspiring moment that our Savior is coming back. and in that moment all things will be made new. And that's our ultimate hope. And as we close, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 is an encouragement, I hope, to you guys. You can go to the next slide. I'm not sure if I had anything else, if anybody wants to write anything down, and sorry that the slides are like way off. But Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, what is the therefore? Because of what was previously there. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight, every burden. Suffering brings burdens. Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance. There's that word endurance again. The race that is set before us. Looking to who? To ourselves, to my circumstances, to who? To Christ, to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus endured the greatest suffering in dying on the cross on our behalf. And now the suffering that we go through is nothing compared to the joy, the peace, and the blessing of being in his presence forever. And that is a joy that I hope you guys also share in through your faith in Jesus Christ. So let's pray, and then we're going to break out into groups, and we're going to apply this passage to our lives. I didn't really have much application tonight. I want you guys to talk about how do I actually develop a heart that is patient through the midst of suffering. You can cut it.